Week 4 of Chem 1102, we talk a lot about alcohols and amines, and we talk about substitution and elimination reactions. And many of these reactions are influenced by steric bulk of the molecule and the electronics of the molecule. And when we're talking about these things, often it's helpful for us to use terms like primary and secondary and tertiary when we're talking about things like carbocations and alkyl halides and amines and alcohols. So this short video will talk about how we use those terms. So in the case of carbocations, I think we've done this already, that a carbocation with a charge on the end with only one attached alkyl group, we refer to as a primary carbocation. We sometimes have one with a little degree symbol next to it. In the case of a secondary carbocation, we're talking about a positive charge with something like 2 alkyl groups attached to it. And in the case of a tertiary carbocation, what we mean is we have a positive charge with 3 alkyl groups attached to it. So this would be our tertiary carbocation. There's no such thing as a quaternary carbocation, so it's just primary, secondary, and tertiary. And we've been through the fact that the tertiary are more stable than the others. If we extend the terminology to alkyl halides, then what we're talking about is how many alkyl groups are attached to the carbon where the halide is attached. So here we've got a bromine attached to a carbon. There's one alkyl group attached here. So we call that a primary alkyl halide, an alkyl bromide. If instead we had 2 alkyl groups attached to where the bromine is attached, then we call that a secondary. And in the case of a molecule with 3 alkyl groups attached to where the halide is attached, we call that a tertiary alkyl halide, alkyl bromide in this case. So that's those terms applied to those molecules. The 2 new things really we're going to do this week involve alcohols and amines. So a primary alcohol is one where the oxygen is attached to a carbon where there's only one hydrocarbon or alkyl group, and a secondary is where the OH is attached to a carbon with 2 alkyl groups. This is our secondary. And a tertiary, the most kind of sterically hindered one, is where the oxygen is attached to a carbon with 3 alkyl groups attached to it. I guess you have to be a little bit careful with some of these things that you remember that it's the oxygen attached to the carbon and the number of groups attached to that. So in the case of this molecule, you may be initially tempted to think that this is a molecule which is a secondary alcohol, because you see this sort of branch point here, but remember it's the carbon where the OH is attached that we're looking at, so this is a primary alcohol. The last one we need to do is just amines. So it's a little bit similar, but here we're talking about the number of alkyl groups attached to the nitrogen. So this amine is a primary, and the secondary that you're looking for is where you've got 2 alkyl groups attached to the nitrogen. So this is a secondary, and our tertiary is going to be where there's 3 groups attached to the nitrogen. So that's a tertiary amine. Uniquely with amines, it's possible to have quaternary amines. So that's where we've got a nitrogen with 4 groups attached, and the nitrogen itself would then have a positive charge, and that's a quaternary. So let's put a 4 with a little degree symbol as a quaternary amine. Again, remember to think about the number of things attached to the nitrogen itself. So again, just as with the alcohol example, something like this with just one alkyl thing attached to the nitrogen would still be a primary amine. Don't get confused by the branch points. Okay, so that's the issue of primary and secondary and tertiary and maybe quaternary, applied to carbocations, alkyl halides, alcohols, and amines. In the next short video for week 4, we'll do a little bit of nomenclature about amines and alcohols.